She's making her Katie Halper show debut. I think she may be making her YouTube debut. Skaii is a 15-year-old high school student who lives in Maryland. She is a Marxist activist and does public speaking, rallying, and demonstrations for Palestine. Recently, she has experienced heightened censorship and harassment from her school administration. So welcome, Skaii.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So tell us first how you got involved in pro-Palestine activism.
Well, when it came to my activism in general, I began doing a lot of work for feminism, and eventually I realized that race and class struggle is directly intertwined into any form of oppression. So that snowballed into me becoming a Marxist, and when I became a Marxist, I realized that true liberation cannot be possible without Palestinian liberation, so I began organizing and demonstrating for Palestine.
Were your parents political or any relatives who were political, or did you come to it on your own?
I was raised by my brother, who's a really big Marxist, really, really smart, and he raised me.
Well, he raised you well, if I do say so myself. Tell me about the kind of Palestine solidarity that you engage in. What does that look like?
It started, I first went to a lot of vigils for Palestine since I live really close to DC. And then it was marches and rallies and demonstrations. And I realized that agitation is one very important part of revolution, but it's one part. So I began continuing to educate myself, for example, on Cuba, on the Philippines, on Sudan, on Congo, on Haiti. And through educating myself and then being able to educate my peers, I've also been able to spread more awareness in my school about Palestine. And I also do a lot of public speaking for Palestine as well.
And so tell us about the kind of pushback that you've gotten.
From my school administration in particular, I've been pulled out of class like plenty of times, like when it comes to concern about my activism and what I say about Palestine. I've been told that saying the word like Zionist or like Zionism is like attacking somebody for their religious belief, and that I'm not allowed to say the word Zionist or Zionism in the school building. I've been pulled out of like multiple core classes by security in order to kind of berate me about continuing to talk about Palestine.
And what about from your classmates?
I've had, obviously, like, I don't want to take away the attention from like because I'm not Muslim, I'm not Arab, I'm not Palestinian, so I acknowledge the fact that I have more privilege in that sense, but I have been like shouted at like, oh, we don't allow terrorist supporters here in the hallways. There's been like, I've received like plenty of like nasty DMs from my classmates. But
tell me more about how you see the world and why you see Palestinian liberation as key to political progress and to liberation in general.
Yeah, so I think the thing about politics and like especially like economics, like at least to like high schoolers, is that it's just like kind of like this another like niche, like nerdy hobby that you can get into. And part of it is about, living in the suburbs and being surrounded with sort of like this bubble from class struggle. But the truth is that many of our issues, whether it comes to gender or racial inequality, always ties back to the core issue of capitalism and class struggle. And the way that this relates back to Palestine is that the thing that whenever we have like conflicts, for example, in the Middle East, it's always like, oh, it's just happening in the Middle East because it's happening in the Middle East. But that's not true. The Middle East is a very, very crucial region when it comes to maintaining control over the global south and maintaining that kind of capitalist control. And imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. And there's no way that we can break free from the chains of neocolonialism and capitalism if we don't liberate all of our comrades, which includes Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and so many more.
And are there any organizations that you're involved in, or political parties, or some kind of networks that you've created for people your age to be involved in your political work?
There's this socialist Marxist-Leninist party in DC called PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. I've worked with them a lot.
Which is what Claudia de la Cruz, who I've had on my show, that's her party. She's running for president with that party.
Yeah, they have like another branch. It mainly focuses on college students, Students for Socialism, but I've also worked with them.
Is Palestine something that kids your age you think care about to the extent that you've experienced it?
I think, at least speaking from my experience in like the MoCo area, which is like the general area that I live in. I think especially, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but a lot of the majority of the kids in our area, more on the affluent side, definitely more upper middle class. There's less of an awareness about class struggle. So politics is always something that's kind of like we're privileged enough to kind of put on the shelf. So I think that although that there definitely are kids who are educated and informed about Palestine and care, there's also a lot of kids who don't, and there's also a very, very high number of Zionist kids in my area.
Were you ever sympathetic to Zionist arguments? Did you ever go through a Zionist phase, or did you not even a Zionist phase, but were you kind of did you fall for the mainstream media's representation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
None of us are immune to propaganda, no matter how informed or how smart we like to portray ourselves. So definitely when the conflict first began, with all the bombardment of mass media, because the thing about mass media is it's not always about trying to get you on their side. It's also trying to get people to be neutral and not feel like they have to go out and get this information. So in the start, I was definitely kind of putting it on the shelf, but then my brother was like, you claim to be a socialist, you need to know about this stuff. So I went out and I learned, and I started demonstrating.
What kind of books have you read, or articles have you read, or how did you go about learning about this issue?
When it comes specifically to Palestine, it's mainly through journalists that I followed. And that's kind of like the thing, because I do understand that we all have our own bandwidth, but it really is not that much to dedicate a bit of time to supporting journalists who are in Gaza, but also not just when it comes to learning about Palestine specifically. It's also about learning about class struggle and learning about revolution in general. So The Black Jacobins by CLR James is a really good book for socialist revolutionaries. And the Communist Manifesto. I know it's like, oh my God, it's all the way back. Like, what could that have to do with like the current time? But when it comes to really acknowledging how deep rooted class struggle is, and that class struggle isn't just like, oh, poor people exist. When you come to really start that journey of understanding that, then it helps make advocating for Palestine a lot easier.
Anything else you want to highlight? Any writers, journalists, books, organizers? Like, do you just want to take the chance to mention anyone?
Like, first and foremost, like when it comes to like Palestine, we should obviously keep our eyes on Palestine, but that also should mean that we should understand that should come synonymous with solidarity with Sudan, with Congo. There's a lot of activism going on DC actually for Sudan and Congo, and those are countries that are also being torn apart by imperialism and colonialism. I already mentioned PSL, but I noticed that the Palestinian Youth Movement, which is a grassroots movement for Palestinian youth to advocate for Palestine, a lot of their posts on social media, especially like Instagram, is being severely like pushed down and restricted, which is really upsetting, but it happens. Journalists like Prince Coda on Instagram is some people that I really think is undervalued. And following organizations like Answer Coalition, PSL, and staying up to date with advocacy for Palestine is really important. And on that note, to just like kind of close off my really big thought, is that the thing is that I kind of forgot to mention this earlier, but Jewish students who are pro-Palestine, they get so much heat. It's actually insane. Because like if a Jewish person is pro-Palestine, I've heard people say, oh, you're a fake Jew. You don't care about our community. You're a self-hating Jew. And it's really the amount of, I would call it anti-Semitism that people go through for advocating for Palestine is insane. And that's the thing. If we want to create a world where Jewish safety is not only protected but also respected, it means creating a world where you don't commit war crimes and wave somebody's religious symbol in the air. It means making sure that people don't think that Jewish safety is exclusive to Palestinian safety. And we need to remember that our advocacy for Palestine isn't anti-Jewish safety. It's synonymous with Jewish safety. So reading up on that is also really important.
That's a really important concept. And yes, I mean, I'm someone who I get called a capo, and those are the people who were like supposed to, be prison guards for basically like subcontracted by the Nazis to treat other Jews, to beat up other Jews, kill other Jews if necessary. Capo, fake Jew, as you said. But can you talk more about how Jewish safety and Palestinian safety are interconnected?
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's the thing, although I'm not excusing Zionists or Zionism at all, a lot of the times I think people need to realize that there aren't so many Zionists because they just spawn that way. It's an exploitation of generational trauma. The fear that Jewish people have for their own safety, that is real and that is valid. But instead of addressing that in a way that actually attacks white and ethnic supremacy, it has been exploited by capitalists and by the ruling class to propagate more ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. So until we address the fact that the reason why so many Jewish people are easily being exploited by this propaganda system is because we have failed to actually address the white supremacy that propagates modern day anti-Semitism. For example, like when we see like any like genuine acts of anti-Semitism today, like for example, I think it was Charlottesville, it was like a few years ago, it was like the people like chanting like Jews will not replace us.
Yeah,
They weren't attacking Israel, they were attacking Jewish people. We're starting to promote the idea that Jewish safety is about protecting Israel, not protecting Jewish people, and that's so dangerous. And that's the thing, when it comes to the Jewish youth and any youth, children are not stupid. Children want the truth, and if you are actively exploiting them through propaganda like education, and when it's so gross to the extent of exploiting a generational trauma of as gross as the generational trauma of the Jewish people, then is that is modern day anti-Semitism. It's actively taking away attention that we could be putting towards taking apart systems of neo-Nazism, neocolonialism, and white supremacy. And people don't realize that activists of any religion, whether it's Islam or Judaism, are getting attacked partially on the basis of their religion when they advocate for Palestine, because this is not about Muslims versus Jews. This is about the working people, the common people versus the ruling class.